A former Trump White House attorney sounding the alarm on what Donald Trump has planned for his political opponents if he wins the election and returns to the White House for a second term. In an interview with NBC News earlier this week, attorney Ty Cobb, who served in the first Trump administration, warned that the former president's focus on the topic of revenge in interviews following his conviction in the New York criminal hush money case is a big red flag. Cobb said, quote, "I think there should be concern," adding, "From a 30,000-foot view, what I see is Trump angrier now than he was before because he is convicted now."
Well, and that matches reporting from John Lemire and others that Trump is just beyond angry and listening to nobody and is just obsessed on revenge.
In multiple interviews in the recent days after his conviction on 34 felony counts by a jury, Trump has pushed the idea of revenge and retribution in his second term. Take a listen.
People are claiming you want retribution. People are claiming you want what has happened to you done to Democrats. Would you do that ever?
Look, what's happened to me has never happened in this country before, and it has to stop because...
Wait a minute. I want to hear that again. It has to stop.
Well, it does have to stop because we're not going to have a country...
And if you're
anymore.
elected, what does that mean? Define that.
Look, what I've gone through, nobody's ever gone through. I'm a very legitimate person. I built a great business. Based on what they've done, I would have every right to go after them. I have a lot of lawyers that are friends and this and that. I had probably 25 guys over the course of a couple of months say, whatever you do, don't testify, because you'll say something that's a little bit off, and you will be indicted for lying, for perjury. These are evil people. These are sick, evil people.
I think you have so much to do, you don't have time to get even. You only have time to get right.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that.
It does.
And sometimes revenge can be justified, Phil. I have to be honest. You know, sometimes it can.
Wouldn't it be terrible to throw the president's wife and the former Secretary of State? Think of it, the former Secretary of State, but the president's wife into jail. Wouldn't that be a terrible thing? But they want to do it. So, you know, it's a terrible, terrible path that they're leading us to, and it's very possible that it's going to happen to them.
Let's bring in editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg, and former U.S. attorney and MSNBC contributor Barbara McQuade. She's the author of a book that just becomes more relevant by the day. You look at the Washington Post article yesterday, you look at our reporting on Sinclair today. Attack from Within, How Disinformation is Sabotaging America. Mike Barnicle and Jonathan Lemire, as well as Caddy Kay, are still with us. Jonathan Lemire, I should go to you first just to get a follow-up on, you know, my reporting, and I know yours too, from inside the Trump campaign, is he's angrier than ever. He's not listening to anybody when it comes to pushing back on revenge. And we see time and time again Hannity trying to move him to saying he's not going to take revenge. And we didn't show the clip where Trump says, "I know you want me to say something nice, but these are but I have every right to go after them." And then you had Dr. Phil trying to say, "You're not going to take revenge, are you?" And he said, "These are sick, evil people. Revenge would be justified." And then, of course, nobody trying to push back on the Hillary Clinton part where he talks about very possible he's going to seek revenge. Like he's fired up and he's ready to go when it comes to seeking revenge to anybody who's opposed him in the past.
Yeah, and I'm told there's a similar dynamic behind closed doors when he meets with advisors or other Republicans, where he'll talk about revenge, sometimes get a look like, well, do you really mean that? And he makes it clear he does. This is retribution. That's the word that has been the center of this Trump campaign for a year now, and that has only been heightened with his anger about this criminal conviction. And let's be clear, he is blustering about how he would be fine with going to prison if he had to. He'd be a martyr for the cause. He says things very differently in private, per my reporting. He also makes it clear on Truth Social with those all-cap screeds just how concerned he is at the prospect of ever being behind bars. And he and his team are putting together an actual agenda of revenge. This is just going to be his rhetoric, which was sometimes what happened in 2020. Trump would spout something off, but his administration would be unable, or frankly at times unwilling, to follow through. But there are not going to be grown-ups in the room this time. They're not going to be guardrails. No. It is just going to be true believers and loyalists. And if Trump says he wants revenge, if Trump says I want to target a particular person or institution, they're going to do just that.
Well, and Jeff Goldberg here on that list too. Welcome to the club. Donald Trump recently going after the Atlantic for actually reporting the truth and reporting what others have said, as well as his chief of staff, his longest-serving chief of staff, that Trump didn't get sacrificed. And when you reported that he had told people around him that people who went to war and died were losers and suckers, he, of course, got angry. He's still pushing back on you now because of a Biden ad. But again, that was confirmed by his longest-serving chief of staff, wasn't it?
Yeah. John Kelly, former Marine general, who lost his son in Afghanistan, confirmed on the record after my story appeared, that these things happen. But my story was well sourced and not refutable, obviously, and so he keeps bringing this up. To be fair, Biden keeps bringing up because the Biden campaign believes that this is an effective line of attack. I'm not so sure it's an effective line of attack. I think all this knowledge we have about Donald Trump and his character and his personality and his beliefs baked in already to the formula here, starting with his attack on John McCain in 2015. But I'm under the impression that this really gets at Trump because it could soften his support among veterans, among military people, if they come to the belief that he really truly has a lack of respect for them and their service.
Barbara McQuaid, yesterday's verdict in the Hunter Biden trial was not a surprise, really, when you look at the evidence that was presented. It's not a surprise that the jury was only out for 3 hours. But I think to a lot of people it was probably a surprise when they thought about it, which is probably not a whole lot. The average person has problems of their own out there. But the son of the President of the United States was on trial. The jury was made up of his neighbors, basically, in Delaware. The president indicated he would not pardon his own son. And yet the reaction on one side of the political aisle was incredible. Does this worry you at all that we are sleepwalking into a situation where the nuts and bolts of this country are going to come popping apart because of the derangement syndrome on the right?
Yeah, I do worry about it, Mike. All of these calls for retribution, and they're coming not just from Donald Trump. We've heard Steve Bannon. We've heard Stephen Miller. Even John Yoo, who is a former Department of Justice official, now a professor. Of course, he was the author of the famous torture memo, so someone on the extreme right. But one of the things he has written is that it is necessary to go after political rivals, to go after people in the Democratic Party. And the purpose of that is to delegitimize the prosecution of Donald Trump. One of the things he has written is we can't let this conviction of Donald Trump stand in history. And so what we need to do is to charge and prosecute other prominent Democrats so that people will understand this is just one more political weapon. And the danger there, of course, is that when people believe that criminal prosecution is simply a political weapon, it delegitimizes the criminal justice system altogether. That means people are less likely to obey the rule of law. And it also encourages people to take the law into their own hands in the form of vigilante violence.
It's so interesting, Jeffrey. I mean, if there are those who think this is paranoia or no, he wouldn't go that far. That's crazy. That's not for this country. I think it's important to remind people to look at what he's already done the first time around, whether it's talking about the January 6 rioters who are in prison, saying he wants to pardon them, calling them hostages, or look at actually what he's done. With the help of his Leonard Leo picks for the Supreme Court, Donald Trump takes credit for overturning Roe. And let's think about what that is.
People said would never happen.
People said that would never happen. 50 years of rights abortion health care, DNCs, anything you need to get health care during a problematic pregnancy or a problem in your pregnancy, you can't get now. Women right now, thanks to Donald Trump, are bleeding out on bathroom floors, in their homes. They're being sterilized. I know this, I would love for this to sound crazy and extreme. It's actually
happening, along with 10-year-old girls getting raped and having to flee states, victims of incest having to flee states.
That's what Trump has already done.
That's what he's already done.
And I hope that people who think this is overkill, oh, he would never have retribution, think about that image of a woman bleeding out instead of getting simple health care because of Donald Trump. He's denied that to them. And I wonder, Jeffrey, why people don't believe their eyes.
Yeah, and their ears. I mean, this is fairly simple in a way. You don't need an intelligence agency to understand what Donald Trump is going to do if he becomes president again. He's telling us every single day. We're getting proof on a daily or weekly basis of a couple of things. The first is that he is focused mainly on retribution. He's focused on not making the mistakes in scare quotes, that he made the first time around, in which he empowered people from the establishment, and they tried to build guardrails. John Kelly was one of them, tried to build guardrails around him. So that's gone. That's finished. He's going to come in loaded for bear. This time he's going to do the Muslim ban right again in scare quotes, so that it actually works and isn't challenged in the same way. That's one thing. The second thing is I listened to the entire Las Vegas rally speech this past weekend. I listened to it mainly because I was mentioned in it, and I wanted to find out the context of this. And I hadn't listened to a full speech in a couple of months. You know, there was a 10-minute segment in there about being whether it's better to be eaten by a shark or be electrocuted by a battery. And I feel like, and this is, I'm going to beat this drum over and over again. I feel like we should, in the media, be covering the, I don't know what word to use for those kind of soliloquies, those kind of unhinged soliloquies. People need to understand that he's not well. Right, and that it's all part of the same package. The desire for revenge, the contempt that he has for everyone, including veterans and soldiers, and these strange flights of stream of consciousness thoughts that if we're coming out of the mouth of Joe Biden, we would be talking about the 25th Amendment. We'd be talking about the possibility of removing him from office. It's you just have to watch and listen and keep your ears open, and you'll see exactly what's coming. Nothing's going to be a surprise, right? Because he's just articulating it over and over and over again.